Hey, Assalamu alaikum everyone. So we'll just give it a few moments to allow everyone to join, inshallah. Hey, Assalamu alaikum, Aziza. So if you're joining, please do just send us your salam and let us know where in the world you're joining from. So just to let you know, we've got a really special Instagram live tonight as we're being joined by Sheikh Rizwan from iSyllabus. So if you get comfy, we'll give it a couple of minutes just to let people in, inshallah. And also just for our guest speaker to join in as well. So if you're just joining, just give us your salam and let us know where in the world you're joining from. That would be fantastic. We're going to be really talking about our daily spirituality principles that we can all live by. And invite Sheikh Ridwan to come in. Walaikum assalam. Bella in cars, let us know what your name is so that we can interact with you. Assalamu alaikum Noreen, thanks very much for joining. Walaikum assalam to Suk, Australia. Shaymana, assalamu alaikum. Ifra, nice to meet you. Ifra, I think you've been in one of our webinars before. And Aya, walaikum assalam, nice to meet you. Oh, assalamu alaikum. I'm seeing lots of familiar faces and names, which is great, mashallah. All right, so we're just waiting for Sheikh Ridwan to join the Instagram live. But what we really want to be talking about tonight is daily success principles. We all suffer with this idea of our daily spirituality, having a daily structure for success. And we have this conundrum of our normal success principles versus what does our religion teach us, and there's this huge almost like contradiction there. And so what I would love to do is break down some of these myths with an expert in this field, Sheikh Ridwan, who will be joining us very, very soon. But before Sheikh Ridwan joins, I would love for you all to put down in the comments, what is that daily spiritual struggle that you all face? Why is it that when you have an awareness of the various acts of worship that you can do in a day, what stops you from doing it? Is it distraction? Is it overwhelm? Is it kids? Is it your morning routine? Is it your evening routine? What is it specifically about your Fajr, right? Okay, so we've got some good stuff going on. So yeah, definitely I think Fajr is like the biggest like kind of thing within our day that definitely it's the one that we all trip up on, and equally it's the one that's like the key to our daily success as well. So what other kind of problems do you go through when it comes to, so we have procrastination by Renew My Faith, sister that we know. So of course procrastination is another really big one as well. Motivation, that's a really good kind of problem to describe it like that. I think most of us have an awareness, but we don't have a willingness to act. And that's what I really want to unpick during this session. So Shamana is saying that COVID messed it all up. It's mentally exhausting, constantly being at a laptop. I suffered from this myself over the past 2 years, taking calls on my laptop from 8 a.m. in the morning to 8 p.m. in the evening, and this constant bombardment of digital, being on your laptop completely wiped out any sort of energy that I had in my worship. And it's funny because sometimes when we even have the little bit of energy that we have for our worship, we simply don't have the energy and the presence in our worship as well. So we're joined by Sheikh Ridwan. So we'll do a little video and mic test first. Sheikh Ridwan, if you want to give
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I hope you can hear me.
Alhamdulillah, we can hear you very well. How are you?
Shabazz, how are you doing?
Yeah,
Alhamdulillah, very well.
You're doing well.
You look well.
Keeping well, yes, I think so. I hope so.
Alhamdulillah.
And how are things back in Glasgow? You're back in Glasgow now.
Back in Glasgow, yes. Alhamdulillah, I've been away for about a year and I've just got back and a lot of people to see. As you know, life continues. You remove yourself from a specific situation, and those people in that situation remain as they are, with their opportunities, their difficulties, their tribulations, their trials, their opportunities. And COVID, obviously, has kind of changed the kind of the arena and the kind of context within which we are living, and that also impacts the way people are dealing with their faith and religion, spirituality. And that's noticeable for me when you speak to people. Their struggles that they had prior to COVID, I think they're extenuated and just multiplied, I think, in some way. But then, it's one of these things, it's the difficulties that are there means that there's greater reward, and there's also more to be gained in making the right decisions as well. So it's one of these situations, it's not gambling, but it's like the higher the stakes, the more that there is that you can actually, reap in terms of benefits. So it's an interesting time to live in. I mean, generally, the Chinese do say, may you live in interesting times, which is almost like a curse, because interesting times are difficult times. And it's like, I think it's SAS, they have this motto, he who dares wins. And we're kind of, the more difficult the situation, the context we live in, the more that's the case. But that statement, he who dares wins, is almost a very Islamic statement for us, which is that, the more that you apply yourself and the more that you take your opportunities and impress upon yourself the need to change, the more that you can actually reap rewards. So it's an interesting time, inshallah.
I think that's he who dares win should be a motto on everyone's wall. So we want to break down the topic of daily spirituality in this Instagram live. And funnily enough, the last time we physically met, we were talking about Ramadan legacy, and you gave a very brief but powerful piece of advice, and you said, if you want to extend Ramadan legacy, all you have to do is really extend what people feel in that month, but throughout the rest of the year. How can we apply these principles that we experience in Ramadan, but throughout the other 330 odd days of the year? And in that sort of journey that we've been on as well, we've asked our audience what are their pain points and struggles when it comes to their daily spirituality. And it's lots of things like procrastination, overwhelm, and lots of COVID and being on their laptop for so many hours in the day, etc. But I think one of the things that we would really like to benefit from in having you here is asking you, some certain questions about how can we live our lives every day in accordance with what God wants from us, in accordance with how can we best optimize ourselves as well. So my first question for you is, what are some of the principles that you live by on a with regards to your daily spirituality? What are some of the principles that you live by every day that you sort of would never let go of when it comes to your daily spiritual success?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So obviously you're assuming that I live by them. I would like to live by them. It's more of a situation where, even though I'm speaking on some kind of public platform to incite people to do what I'm doing, but it's what I would like to do. Let's just put it that way. And one of my teachers, Sheikh Ahmed Ramadan, one of the most elderly scholars now of Damascus. He taught us about spirituality, purification of the heart. And I remember, to this day, I close my eyes and I can see and picture his voice and how he's speaking to us. And he says, spirituality is all about what we call a nukta, a point, a pivotal point. And when he said that, I thought, yeah, so it's a nukta. But then he actually started to express it. And he said, look, it's a dot. In the Arabic, there's two words in Arabic. They're differentiated by a dot. And the dot makes all the difference. And I think for me, I've always had this kind of fascination with what is it that progresses your spiritual life, and what is it that holds back your spiritual life. So it's more like, I think in terms of systems. I think in terms of, systemically, what is the problem with us as human beings? And what he said to me was, and he said it to the rest of the people in this halaqa, was, But the difference is that you get people make a mistake in the first foot they put forward in their path to spirituality. And he says the first step is actually to remove things. It's it's like we're going from summer to autumn. It's a time when you have spring cleaning, and it's almost like you throw everything out, all these kind of bad habits, and that in Arabic is called takhalli. Takhalli. So the dot was the kha, and he said, look, you make a mistake in terms of spirituality, and I think this is the thing that happens in the West when they talk about yoga, they talk about Buddhist spirituality and every other kind of new age system that they have in place for life coaching and nourishing their kind of being and self-development and life coaching, is that they start to fill things up. They try and fill themselves up with good feelings, good energy. Nobody's saying that's not correct. But what in Islam is interesting is Ramadan, you're talking about Ramadan legacy. The whole point of Ramadan is Imam Ghazali says that the analogy is almost like you make yourself an empty, hollow instrument that can resonate with a divine sound. And in Ramadan, when you come to Taraweeh and you come and you hear the Quran in Ramadan after having fasted, it's a completely different resonation, almost like at a DNA level of the Quran within your body, than doing it if it was outside Ramadan and you just had a full meal and you're going to Isha, for example, and you had beautiful recitation, and you're in a beautiful mosque like in the Haram, and there was lots of people, the resonation would still be completely different, because you're the receptacle through which the words of God are now being, almost like amplified. And if you're full of things that shouldn't be there, there's no amplification. There's things getting in the way of that melodious resonation through your being. And so what he said was takhalli. You have to start to empty, you have to shovel out a lot of things out of your soul, out of your nafs. And I think when you're looking at developing, yourself spiritually, I think for me, it's always, when you make dua, we always, think about the keys to dua. So, which direction do you pray in? Are you in tahara? Are you in wudu? And what's the right dua to recite? How many times you recite it? My mind goes to something else, which is, have I done something to somebody today or yesterday or in the past that's a barrier to my dua being accepted? So the Prophet ﷺ said, ittaqu da'wat al-mazlum, be wary and fearful of the dua of a person that's been oppressed, because there's no hijab, no barrier between them and God, no veil. And imagine you're making du'as and you're pumping out these du'as with all the sunan acts and everything is ticked off, and then all of a sudden you forgot that you actually were oppressive and rude and broke the heart of somebody. That's like this barrier. It's almost like this lead barrier that's stopping anything reaching anywhere where it can be of benefit. And so the first thing for me actually is takhalli. It is to start with the right foot. And if you start with the wrong foot, it's almost as if you're filling up something. It's like, Imam Ghazali actually makes the example of trying to beautify a pig. Do you understand? So it's like you need to clean this place up, or you need to do it somewhere else. You need to beautify something that can be beautified. And I think human beings, as Muslims and as just human beings generally, I think we need to be aware of our actions. We need to be aware of the responsibilities that we have ethically. And this is why Islam is such a beautiful religion, I believe, which does away with a lot of things that other religious spiritual traditions maybe overlook, which is it makes sure that you don't oppress people systemically throughout your life, because there are certain principles that you're living by in terms of how you greet people, how you meet people, your rights and responsibilities to your neighbors and to your family, to poor people, to governments, to individuals. So once you're kind of almost sure that you're not oppressing systemically and you're not being unjust systemically, then you've got this system in place, which is the basic tick off: your fast in Ramadan, your 5 prayers, your zakat, your hajj, and the good actions that you do generally. That's almost like this system that you have ready that is going to allow you to, maximize, we could say, leverage the ibadah that you do, the good intention that you have, the choices that you make, the planning that you put in place. And I think the first thing is barriers. I think spiritual barriers, we need to be very aware of those. And I would rather spend, I'm being very honest here, I'd rather spend half a day trying to rectify something that I'd, done as a mistake and maybe harm somebody, than to spend half the day or the full day in dhikr and ibadat and recitation of Quran, you can list, all the good actions. And I believe that there's a basis for that, because the Prophet ﷺ, the Prophet ﷺ, he went to the Kaaba, he took the cloth of the Kaaba and he said, Ma a'zamaki, how immense are you and how great is your honor in the eyes of God. But I swear by Allah that the honor of a believer, a human believer, is far greater in the eyes of God. And so you've got this situation where the Prophet is in front of the Kaaba, and you cannot get a more blessed place. And he's holding on to the thing that's attached to the Kaaba, and he's making a point that many people completely forget, which is the barriers that we put in between ourselves and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are our own job. We have to start to rectify that. And that's why even, thinking about it, when Sayyidina Umar was about to push himself through to get to the black stone, the Prophet warned him and said, be careful that you don't oppress somebody in getting to it. Rather, if you can't, then do it from a distance. And so what did he prefer? He preferred stopping yourself from doing something that's going to hurt other people. And I think, as human beings, especially in the days we live in, where you have, we're almost like living in a bubble, or a kind of technological bubble, where we don't even see the effects of our actions. For example, you can do things and say things online which can have devastating effects on people's mental health and on their life generally. You don't think about it because there's no tangible kind of effect there. But I think we need to start to factor that in, especially when people are operating so much online. They do things and say things, I think, that really are barriers between them and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So right at the first thing, off the bat, that is what I always, the mindset of making sure and looking back, have I oppressed anybody? Is there a barrier between me and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala?
So what I'm hearing is almost like cleansing yourself, reflecting, being accountable for yourself and your actions, and building that into your day-to-day routine. If someone, and many people here are leading a kind of like a fast-paced lifestyle, they wake up, they've got kids, they're going to work, what is the easiest way in which we can build that practice of accountability, self-awareness, being aware of what we're doing in our day-to-day lives?
I think it's simple things, because the Prophet said, he said, we all know about the hadith of intention. So, and I think we all know about it, but I don't think we leverage it, because if you've got so much in your life, you're busy day in, day out. It's almost like it's not just 9 to 5, it's 24/7, and it's children and it's career and it's development. I think we have to leverage certain things. And I think intention is this amazing tool that we have. The Prophet said that, the intention of a believer is more potent. Niyatul mar' khayrun min amalihi. The intention of a believer is more potent than their action. Now, what does that mean? It means the Prophet indicating something about leverage, about the utility of that. Because, one of my teachers from Hadramaut, he passed away, rahimahullah, about just under a decade ago. He wrote a book, Kitab al-Niyat, the Book of Intentions. It's actually published in English, translated. I think it's out of print, but I'm sure you can get hold of something online. In it, he basically put down a number of intentions you can do during the day. When you're drinking coffee, for example, when you're meeting people, when you're going to the marketplace, when you're doing a business transaction, when you're looking at a child. So there's all these intentions he had, and you're thinking, why is he making all these intentions? Because what he said is essentially that when you wake up, the key to productive spirituality is to make your intentions right from the get-go. The moment you wake up, give yourself 5 minutes and make these intentions. Let's do this. Let's intend to, do good actions and list them and put them in order. Because he says, look, if you are unable to do that, you still get this leverage of the intention and the reward of that and the blessing of that. Because things happen during the day. The things you intended to do. Remember, these are not promises. These are not saying to somebody, I'll recite this amount of Quran, or I'll give this amount of charity, or I'll help you doing this. This is mentally going through the process of making intentions. So, that person wanted help in moving. If I get 10 minutes in my schedule, I'll try and do something. They wanted help in this spreadsheet. If I get time, I'll do this. You make the intention mentally, and maybe you do it. If you do it, you get the reward of the intention and the action. But if you don't get around to it, at least. You don't tell them that you're intending, because that's, it's a false promise. But if you do it and you get the intention, this is leveraging intention. And I think that's very, very important for people in terms of just the mindset. I think the mindset is very, very important in these things. It's not about what you do, but I think the mindset is important.
There's even in one of the hikam that you go through in the syllabus course, which is don't delay your most important actions, because by thinking that you have free time later on is almost like this kind of myth or misconception that you actually have free time later on in the day. And I think that really resonates with what you've just said, which is set out your intentions for the day, but also prioritize them as well. Is that something that you do? Like when you wake up in the morning, Sheikh, like apart from I don't know, praying Fajr and reading Quran or making dua, are there any other principles or practices that you personally do that help you through the day?
Yeah, I also prioritize things in terms of importance, and importance for me is impact. What can get to the most amount of people, not like millions of people. I'm thinking get to the right number of people that can then develop to get to the right people. So I don't think get to the people like directly. I don't think that in that way at all. Because I think getting and having a massive reach or having a social media presence is really good for some people, and I think it's an amazing tool that some scholars have utilized, and they've ended up impacting people's lives in amazing ways. But I always think, look, if I can get through to this person or that person, they can then do strategic things, and it might not just be a social influencer. It might be a politician. It might be a doctor. It might be somebody who has a friend circle which is quite important in my city, for example. So I think, okay, let's prioritize. Let's give this a bit of time. Let's give this a bit of thought. Let's give this person a bit of support. So, for example, somebody's going through a difficult time. Their difficulty is such that if they end up collapsing, spiritually or mentally, it's going to have impact on a lot of people. So I think, look, that person is a keystone, pivotal person in their community. Let's support that person. Let's get help to that person, because we can't afford to let that person, go by the wayside. And so for me, it's about impacting in the background. It's more about helping people. And this is, again, that's about intention. You make the intention, then you look at it, and if you have the time, you put your effort in and do that. And so the first thing I mentioned was the issue of obstacles. I think the obstacle of your own actions, and that thing of takhalli, just clearing everything out. And that obviously means that the second step, which I didn't mention, which is the thing that people always do first, is tahalli. Tahalli and takhalli, you can see the difference. Tahalli is to actually fill things up, fill the engine. We're talking in the UK, I don't know if you're in the UK, but there's shortages of fuel now, so people are rushing to the gas stations or whatever, petrol stations, to fill up. And the thing is, I remember I was 16, I drove to London myself, or was it somebody else? I can't remember. And we got to London, I had to fill up, and I actually put the wrong fuel in, and I think I put diesel into the petrol. And so I had to suck out all this diesel out of the tank, because you can't fill something in if it's not empty. It had diesel in it, it had petrol in it, it was a petrol engine, I put diesel in. This disrupted the engine. And the thing is, the human beings are the same. You can't fill things up if they're not empty, they're not ready to take it. And that's why at that point, you think of the good actions you can do. So my first thing is always about actions after your own worship, and actually minimizing. I personally try and minimize my worship if it means I can impact other people. Then you look and see what are the good things you can do. And the amazing thing about Islam, the blessing of Islam is that, the Prophet said that, Islam has faith, and faith has portions, which has 77 portions. And so the Prophet mentioned all these different actions, from the most minute, such as just removing something from the street that's going to harm somebody. We have a whole, arsenal of actions that we can do. And that means every single person. So if I can influence a very influential person, I'll do that. But people listening maybe are not able to do that. But they can still have an impact on something or in some way. And that is still, weighed on the scale. So at that point, you look and you would advise that you look at and see what's the most potent, what's the most effective action that you can do as an individual.
So step one is to تخلي, which is remove the obstacles. The second
Mm.
step would be تحلي. Is that what you said?
Yeah,
تحلي,
yeah, filling
which
up,
is
filling up. Yeah.
filling up your day. Third would
Mm.
be making the right intentions, nia,
Hmm.
and fourth is almost prioritizing them by the impact that you can personally make
Mm.
on the day. I think that's an
Absolutely.
amazing like kind of framework to that we can all operate and live by.
Mm.
Um,
It's a subconscious one, isn't it? Because once you prioritize, the key here is this is a sequence. Now, if you put one above the other, I think it just completely atrophies and fails.
mm,
And the thing about takhalli, why it's so important, is takhalli is not just looking at the obstacles that you have between God and maybe you've oppressed somebody, but takhalli at a deeper level, actually, Shabazz, is about being honest with yourself, looking yourself in the mirror and saying, okay, what do I have to do to self-improve myself?
mm,
So I have issues about envy or pride, ostentation, arrogance. You need to be fair with yourself and honest with yourself and say, this is the thing that will trip me up in my spiritual journey.
mm,
And I need to be honest with myself, and I want to, it's almost like Elon Musk. You want to get to outer space, spiritual outer space.
mm,
How do you do that? You need to ditch all this stuff that's holding you back.
mm,
Essentially, these are the spiritual diseases: pride, arrogance, anger, ostentation, hiqad, hasad. These are the things that really pull you down. And one of the greatest is love of the world, just having an attachment. And from it, spawns all these things about fame and fortune, and your intention gets corrupted as well. That's important.
mm,
Because the thing is, if you have intention and you make intentions and you have an intense love and attachment to the world and worldly existence, you'll never have a pure intention. And that's what Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah, he says that the thing that corrupts your intention is love of the world.
mm,
So you can see our scholars in the past, they were very systematic. It wasn't just, meditate and recite Quran and do dhikr and everything be okay. They were so precise, almost like medically precise. It's almost like there's a surgeon there. Even as a surgeon goes into the heart and operates, and looks at the different vessels that go into the heart. The spiritual doctors always used to say, look, this spiritual disease is more important than this leads to that. And so you have to treat the root cause. And they would follow it all the way back and say, that's it. Your problem, which might not be my problem, is this.
mm,
And so everybody has a different problem.
mm,
Based on their nature and their nurture, the way they're brought up, the way their family was, the way their parents was, the way their schooling was. Inbuilt within them is a specific barrier between them and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why therapy, things like therapy and revisiting things that are barriers to you, almost psychologically, is actually in some way part of that spiritual journey as well.
mm. Sheikh, like these, like there was many sort of comments earlier on from individuals whereby people are now looking towards their faith, their Islamic faith, for sort of answers to these daily problems and struggles that they're going through with their spirituality. But when we look at Buddhism or even like Stoicism now, it's getting this sort of widespread adoption that whether you're even a Christian or you don't associate with any particular faith, um, these sort of principles of living like a Buddhist or living by Stoicism seems to be very sort of widely spread and sort of adopted in the mainstream. There's shows about it, etc. But a lot of these sort of values and principles also live within the Islamic faith. So why do you think that is? Like, why do you think that the values and the principles that our religion teaches us hasn't really gained that full kind of mainstream adoption, even when like we sort of have those answers and systems in place?
That's a good question, because that's something I grapple with a lot, which is there is a space there's a space within mainstream society for spirit, because the spirit exists. I mean, the more you deny the spirit and the spiritual life of the human being, the more you're alienating yourself from existence itself. So people, you go from celebrities all the way to normal people. There is this kind of hollow piece of their existence which needs to be spiritually nourished.
Mm,
Now, the thing about the kind of systems you've talked about, Stoicism and the kind of Buddhist kind of, I would call it kind of new spiritual awakening, is that the framework that's there is not there. There's no framework. And I think the thing that I talked right at the beginning about barriers and about oppression and about in some way quantifying if you were right in something you did or not, that is the criteria for that is based upon something. So what is that? You know, if you look at the systems you've mentioned, that's very subjective. You could be a hardened mafioso and you could do your meditation and you could be living a deep spiritual life and you're just popping off people in Sicily without blinking an eyelid. Because for you, subjectively, that is ethical and moral because of, you know, you're trying to, you know, aid certain people and you need to get rid of other people. You can imagine Tony Blair, you know, having a deep spiritual life based on his criteria that certain people are evil extremists and he goes to sleep perfectly happy knowing that he's doing, but the criteria of that have to be objective. Now, morality, it goes down to the whole thing about morality. How do you judge what's moral, what's not? Moral meaning what's oppressive and what's not oppressive, what's good and what's not good. Unless you have an objective standard for that, you cannot make that judgment call. So the first step, which was removing obstacles, what are those obstacles? Everybody will have different opinions on that. This is, I mean, talking about philosophical here. This is a whole chapter in philosophy. Unless we can decide what that is, everybody's guess is as good as the others. Which is why you'll find so many people going through new spiritual paths, but at the end of the day, there's deep depression there. There's deep anxiety. There's deep psychological issues. And I think at the core of that, there's deep lack of contentment as well. I think these are almost like, you know, we talk about in Islam, in Islam we talk about iman boosts. You know, you probably heard this. So this is, for me, it is a spiritual boost that people get and they go on a spiritual journey. And I don't think it lasts. I mean, I watch popular culture. I watch people going through spiritual paths like Madonna. You know, all these kind of, you name the people, I've seen their kind of trajectory. And you even see people looking at Islam and reading books. You know, they have very famous celebrities reading the Quran in public and carrying it about. And you know where that's from. It's because there's a hollow part of their existence which needs to be filled. And one of my teachers, he passed away, rahimahullah, 3 months ago now. He told me something which was, you know, still resonates with me. He says, well, he said at that point, this was like 22 years ago. He said, Radwan, you will not find people denying that there's a God. He says, like, no intelligent person will deny there's God. There's a creator, there's a sustainer. You will find people denying that they have to live by his laws. In other words, they would rather live by their own laws. Subjective, personal to you, based upon what you feel. Because we live in the age of feeling. We don't live in the age of reason. We don't live in the age of faith. We don't even live in the age of science. We live in the age of feeling. And that means with social media, and you've got love of the world and all these kind of spiritual diseases all over the place, it's what makes you feel good that's going to get the traction. And unfortunately, because Buddhism has actually been, you know, kind of cut off from its, you know, its kind of religious and moral moorings in modern society in the way it's used. And Stoicism is just like a subjective hodgepodge, essentially. It means that everybody is their own God. And what I see is people worshipping themselves because there's no submission. And this is why Islam is so beautiful. It is connected to peace, but submitting. You submit and you get this peace. You don't get peace and you submit. And so for me, Islam, the meaning patterns of Islam, you know, very much answer your question, which is that, you know, you have to submit yourself to a moral value. That's not you, because you can't make that judgment. Once you do it, you will have this intense peace. And that's what I, you know, when I think of my teachers and the people that I've respected over my life, and even people from other religious paths, like I've met very, very prominent Jewish scholars who have had this sense of peace. And that sense of peace is because they've submitted to a law. They have dictated what they need to do based upon somebody else. And just subsuming that to another power and saying, this is what I need to do and I have no choice in the matter, that creates a sense of discipline. I think that modern Muslims as well, you need to really get a grip with this, because it's very easy to make Islam almost like cut and fit and fashioned into your own lifestyle. I think we need to be very careful. Islam can be easily integrated within your life, whatever you're doing. It is such a progressive religion in that sense. But you always have to, this idea of what's moral, what your responsibilities are. I think we shouldn't be the people that decide that, because the age of feeling means that you yourself become almost like a pharaoh. Ana rabbukum al-a'la, the famous statement of Pharaoh resonates for me for a lot of people, because the moment you say you know what's best, you're right there with Pharaoh, I think.
SubhanAllah. I think there's lots of reactions popping up on the Instagram. I think that was such an amazing answer to that question. Jazakallah khair. So just to let everyone know here as well more about yourself and also your work at iSyllabus, and the fact that you've almost created the syllabus at iSyllabus, so that individuals can have this spiritual nourishment that they're all seeking, but throughout an entire year. Talk to us a little bit about the 1-year diploma that you're teaching, and I'll also, just whilst you're talking, put in the comments about how people can learn more from you and also join this 1-year program as well.
Yeah, so the 1-year program we developed, myself, Sheikh Amr, we talked about this for a long time before we actually started it. We actually consulted with a lot of people, a lot of people in the community that were there. We spoke to them what their spiritual needs, what their religious needs, what kind of, not duplicating, but what are the kind of missing links in what they need. And it was exactly that idea of filling up and looking at what your responsibilities are as a Muslim was very, very important to us, because people are busy, they don't have much time, but they don't want superficial knowledge. I don't believe in superficial knowledge. I believe in referencing. I believe in making sure people know exactly where your information is coming from. But it's that idea of setting a standard for your actions, making you very clear about your responsibilities and your rights, about your obligation to God, your creator, and how that amplifies in terms of spirituality. That thing of takhalli and tahalli. So there's a couple of modules on takhalli, which is spirituality and purifying the heart. But then you have tahalli, which is to fill up. What are the good actions you can do? How do you pay zakat? How do you fast? How do you do hajj? How do you pray? But then also, Ibn Qayyim al-Jawzi, he talks about spirituality. He says, look, there's certain diseases that actually affect your creed, your faith. Meaning, I'll give you a perfect example. If somebody passes away of, let's say, an incurable cancer, and you're watching the person pass away, and you've been fasting and praying and reciting Quran all your life, and this person is going through intense pain, and they're the closest relative to you, and you're making dua and nothing's happening. At that point, Ibn Qayyim basically says that if you are afflicted with a specific spiritual disease, such as, which affects your faith, you will start to question the predestination of God. And that is based upon a spiritual disease that affects then your faith, affects your understanding of a basic creed of Islam, which is believing that God has predestined things and there's a wisdom behind things. And so even that was covered in the course, because I thought that's a massive barrier. If you don't perceive God in your day-to-day life and understand how every day you wake up, you're either, as Ibn Ata'illah, you mentioned the famous hikam of Ibn Ata'illah. He says that al-ghafil idha asbaha yanzur madha yaf'al. The person who's oblivious to God, when they wake up, they think, what can I do? And I think that's amazing, because you were saying, the day-to-day, kind of process. That hikam's fantastic, because he says, the person who's, oblivious of God, when they wake up, they think, what can I do? And they start to put plans in place. And he says the person is intelligent. Al-aqil idha asbah yanzur madha yaf'al Allah bihi. He says that when an intelligent person who's aware of God wakes up, they think, what is God going to make me go through? And it's almost like they're waiting to see, they're not sitting there thinking, okay, God, go. And, okay, I'm waiting. It's not that. It's the fact that they're saying, oh, what does God want me to do today? What are the things around me that God would like me to do? And so if you see a person in need, God is telling you, you aid the person that's in need. And so they're moving based upon what God puts in their plate. And I think the iSyllabus course was doing all that. Creed, spirituality, your basic worship. And then the other thing that I was talking about, that idea that people decide what's good and bad. We talked about Sharia. So we have these 2 modules in Sharia, which basically look at how does the religious law operate? How is it formulated? What are the major principles there? Because we have to make sense of it. I mean, for too long, I think Muslims have been people that just say, okay, well, if that's what's written, we just follow it. And we don't look at the reasons, we don't look at the kind of wisdom behind it. We need to look at the wisdom behind these things. And so we have a whole section about the Sharia, how it works, how it operates. Add to that, just a very deep understanding of the Quran and Sunnah that we kind of go through. And then an added layer of contextualization. So there's all these things going on in the course. People think it's a year's course and it's just a straight road. It is multi-layered. It's got contextualization going in there, spirituality going in there. There's lots of themes. I mean, people that have done it, there's over 1,000, I don't know, 4,000 or 5,000 people have done it face to face easily. If not 6, I think 6,000 people have done it. They've all come back with the same kind of feedback, which is, we didn't realize that you could pull this off in a year. And that's the kind of, that was the key to our course, which is to try and pull all this off in a year. And inshallah, we did do it.
And does it start, can people sign up and start at any point in the year, or is there like a semester and term that it follows?
Yeah, so what we do is we start with the university. We follow the basic university semester system. So, the end of our intake for this year is in September, I think a couple of weeks, probably this week coming up, 28th. So 20th of September, I think, is our first class. So we start then, but we always have like intake of students for the first, say, 4 or 5 weeks. So until, the year is completely started, we have an intake of students. That continues then for 3 semesters. And I think we end up going into June, July by the time we finish the course. And so we have 6-week blocks, and we have a short examination or assessment. We have another 6 weeks, and that continues for the full 15 modules. So within that period, you've done 15 topics. You've had, myself and Sheikh Amr teaching in different styles, different ways. And obviously the course has changed a lot because we moved online. And so we've utilized, a lot of technology, live streaming the classes, allowing them to be on demand, having, live Q&A, points where we can get the feedback from students as they're watching to answer the questions, quizzes, online exams. I mean, we've tried to recreate as much as you can the kind of experience of what students missed from the live classes. Added to that, the whole portal that we have that allows people to kind of do it in their own time. And so that happy balance, hopefully the idea was a happy balance over the 3 semesters where people can, benefit from it and maximize their education.
Perfect. And there's also a question that we can sign up even if we're not in the UK. So the answer to that is yes. You can sign up wherever you are in the world to the iSyllabus program. And I think it's honestly, some people do it twice, thrice, and I know people that have done it 4 or 5 times because there is so much depth and breadth to the knowledge that it provides you, and it's a mix of everything. So it's not just, you're learning fiqh for 1 year or hadith for a year or tafsir for 1 year. You get a mix of all of these different modules, which gives you this very sort of holistic framework in which you can start to learn further about Islam, but also implement it within your day-to-day life as well. There's another question by Sister Shimana. What time are the classes, Sheikh? When do they run? What days and times?
So the classes are the live classes that we teach are on Tuesday and Wednesday. So these are UK time, I think 7 o'clock. So I think Tuesday we have 2 classes and Wednesday you have 1 class. So they're the live stream. And then once the live stream is finished, I think almost immediately you have access to the recording on your portal. So people that get the live stream, they also have the opportunity to ask questions while we're teaching. And sometimes, in the break, we have like a break in between the lesson as well, where I sometimes go on and start answering questions and look at the kind of feedback. And, sometimes I kind of go off topic, depending on what's happening in the day, politics. Usually I follow politics and economy and tech. So I end up kind of getting distracted and end up going on a tangent, but always bring it back to the topic. So you get that experience live, but then you get that recording, ready for you, and you have access to that for the full year as well.
One of the things that I found really handy was getting access to the recordings. So even if you're, busy on a Tuesday night or a Thursday night, you're able to always catch up on the weekends, or if your kids are having a bad night. And I think that's what makes the program like sort of very flexible and amazing for an experience that you go through, and just sort of having the opportunity to ask questions as well. So uh, for the individuals sort of watching, as you're doing the sort of iSyllabus 1 year diploma, so you'll get your sort of your semesters, and you'll get your syllabus for that entire year. You'll be given all of the sort of course notes that you'll be able to print sort of on demand online. And even the course notes are so comprehensive. Even just reading them in advance of the class, then attending the class to ask questions. It's just a phenomenal experience. Like thousands and thousands of people have taken this program, and if millions of people were to take it, that I honestly believe the whole Ummah would be elevated by just taking this one program. Subhanallah. So if you do
So
want to,
we had a Tunisian student actually in Edinburgh. She was doing a PhD, and she heard her friend was doing it, and she just arrived in Edinburgh. She was looking to do things, and she'd obviously been in a Muslim country. There's lots of scholars teaching there. So she ended up joining the class, and she used to sit at the front. I remember going to Edinburgh and teaching the class in university. She used to look really pensive and kind of, and then she finished the course, and then she wrote an email to the admin, which actually took my breath away. She said, I was in tears having finished the course. There was nothing like this in our country. And she thought, I'd never thought coming to Edinburgh to do a PhD in, I think it was computer science or something, that she would study her own faith in such depth. She's thinking moving from a Muslim country to a non-Muslim country. She's thinking, I hope I find a mosque. And she just found, the course that we did, alhamdulillah, that was like, for me, I remember she was so enthusiastic. She met me actually in the group when we were doing Umrah in Istanbul. She was there for a job interview, years later, about 3-4 years later. She specifically found out where we were. She came and met the group, and she just said, look, it was a life-changing experience. For me, that kind of feedback that we get from students, says for me, yes, I think we do need to take it more international. I'm thinking of translating into Arabic and Turkish and
mashallah,
Urdu,
that'll be
inshallah.
that'll be absolutely incredible. And you would be able to do that because you're fluent in all of these languages, Sheikh, aren't you?
Not Urdu, I mean, हमारी जो उर्दू है इतनी अच्छी नहीं है.
Apart from Urdu, Turkish, your Arabic, Farsi, all these, but Urdu needs to be a bit better.
Alhamdulillah.
Okay, Jazakallah khair, and thank you so much for your time. And just for individuals still watching, getting a hold of Sheikh Ridwan is harder than getting a hold of Boris Johnson. Just so you all know, it's a very, very amazing time that we've had with you. Just all of the things that you've shared with us, and just to almost sort of recap in a very, very basic, non-eloquent way, on those sort of daily spirituality tips. Would be sort of remove your obstacles, fill up your cup with goodness, set your intentions, and prioritize them by impact. And I believe that this sort of spiritual nourishment that we all need, like throughout the entire year, can happen through the iSyllabus 1 year diploma. Just getting that, that going on that journey of spiritual development through this program with teachers like yourself and Sheikh Amr is almost like, changed the trajectory of people's lives, especially here in the UK, and we're also hearing from people abroad as well. Without iSyllabus, it's almost hard to think where we would get that education from, and also that spiritual nourishment as well. So Jazakallah khair for your time. For individuals still here, I've put this message a few times in the comments, but if you want to ask any further questions at all, you can just message us at Towards Faith or message at iSyllabus. If you've got any further questions on the 1 year diploma, we're more than happy to answer them for you, inshallah. And hopefully you join now, because the classes start at the end of September. And when you start in that Jama'ah, when you start together in the beginning, you always aim to end together as well. And normally when you kind of come in a month or 2 months
You know,
late,
Shabaza, I'll
yeah,
mention that last year was our first online class, and
last,
more people come.
yeah,
Yeah, so this year that has passed, and
subhanallah.
more people completed the course than any other year previous to this in terms of percentage. More people passed the course last year than any other year.
Mashallah.
And you know, that's an amazing, you know, just to think. There was a sister from Glasgow who couldn't do the course for the 10 years we were teaching in Glasgow.
Mm,
Ended up doing it in Pakistan because it's online.
wow.
And she couldn't, for reasons logistical or whatever, she couldn't attend the classes in Glasgow, maybe 10 minutes from her house. Now she's doing the other side of the world, benefiting, and she wrote an email and she did a testimonial. So it shows, like, you know, people, you know, she must have waited so long to do it, and
Mm,
the time was right, and online portal was there.
mm,
And you know, it just means that, you know, there's never the right time. You need to make those decisions for yourself
mm.
and better yourself.
Mm, that's right. And just to answer the last question, it's almost like September to September, so it
Mm.
follows your typical sort of university year that you would go through, and there's breaks as well, isn't there? There's a break during sort of Christmas and New Year time. I think there's a break. Is it a break in the sort of October break, October, November, Christmas, and then around the springtime, Sheikh? Is that right?
To be honest, my knowledge of timetable is not that good. I think there is a kind of a window at winter,
Yeah,
roughly the kind of, yeah, the New Year time. And then I think roughly April time, I think there's a slight window there as well.
that's correct.
But what we find is we always have 1 week off where we have exams and you have time to kind of freshen your mind. But I think it's one of these things that it's like exercise. It's exercising the mind and the spirit at the same time.
Mm,
So what people say, it's almost like a habit they get. And a lot of people complain that they don't want to break the habit for 2 weeks.
mm,
And so what we try and do is minimize the kind of the times within which you are kind of disengaged with learning. Because learning, remember, it's small but regular.
mm,
And this is where the Prophet said that the best and most beloved actions to God, أدومها وإن قل, the most persistent, continuous, even if they're small.
mm,
And remember, this is just three, check-ins during the week. That you check in, you get your knowledge, and you've got the whole week. You know, you can fill that with anything. You can fill that with the most amazing action.
mm,
But you know, give yourself, your spirit, your mind some time. And I think investing in yourself. I think one thing that COVID has proven is that people have started to think about investing in themselves.
mm.
You know, people taking career breaks, people going back to education. Now think of Muslims going back to their faith, like fresh, like going, okay, I've been praying and fasting. I want to understand why I do all this in a deep way.
Mm.
I think for Muslims, I think, you know, if other people are doing it, they must be doing it for a reason, because they're going down a path which they're not happy with. I think as Muslims, we should always be in a state of muraqabah, thinking and introspection, and questioning why we're doing things we're doing. You know, today I was teaching my girls some Quran, and the question comes up, فَأَيْنَ تَذْهَبُونَ? Where then are you going? The Quran says, فَأَيْنَ تَذْهَبُونَ? You know, so that for me, when I was reading, I was thinking, yeah, Rizwan, where are you going? You know, what's the purpose of your life? And that is timeless.
Mm.
And I think with COVID, the break and the disruption has meant that that perennial question becomes even more prominent.
Subhanallah, Jazakallah khair. So just for everyone here, please follow at iSyllabus. The link to sign up to the 1 year diploma is on their bio on their Instagram account. So if you click that and you use the discount code FAITH10, you'll be able to get 10% off the 1 year diploma course. Sheikh, Jazakallah khair for being with us. Honestly, it's a complete honor. I was actually really nervous before this Instagram live, because I was like, Sheikh Rizwan's coming on Instagram live, need to prepare
Well,
all
you're
these.
lucky it wasn't about philosophy. It wasn't about philosophy, even though you touched upon it.
there,
That
there,
would be my preferred topic, or
there,
creed.
there's a little philosophical part of me that does exist, that likes to and I think that's important as well, and I think that's what comes out of the iSyllabus program, that you get to learn about Islam from so many different angles, and that gives you this kind of holistic nourishment as well through the entire program. Alhamdulillah. So we'll let you go, Sheikh. We know it's late. You have kids. You've got a family, and it's coming up to the sort of Isha prayer now.
My wife told you to say that, didn't she?
No, no, she didn't. She didn't. She just told me to be here on time with you.
Alhamdulillah.
And it was funny
Alhamdulillah.
to hear your name as just Rizwan, because we all naturally say just Sheikh Rizwan. I've never heard someone say Rizwan, so when I heard that I was like, whoa, it's the first time I've heard that.
My mother says it all the time. So,
Alhamdulillah. Right, folks, Jazakallah khair to you all for
Jazakallah
joining.
khair al-jaza.
Jazakallah khair
Allah
to you
bless you,
there,
inshallah, in
Sheikh.
your work.
And inshallah,
Allah bless your
we'll
work,
see you
inshallah.
soon. Ameen. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
Hey, assalamu alaikum, everyone. Guys, if you have any questions about the iSyllabus program or anything that we've just spoken about, you can ask me. I've done the iSyllabus 1-year diploma and the intermediary, the next part as well. So if you have any questions at all, I'm going to hang out here for another couple of minutes and answer them, inshallah. But if you don't, you can fire away. And head back to your kind of day-to-day schedules. So yeah, if you've got any questions at all on the 1-year diploma, or if you just have any questions with regards to that daily spirituality topic that we just broke down, feel free to answer. So sister's asking, Sister Aya, can you speak more about the meaning of muraqabah? There's a great resource on Yaqeen Institute, which breaks down the differences of muraqabah, muhasabah, tasawwuf, and all of these various sort of reflective terms and concepts. So I'll actually link it to you. So I believe I can message you directly, inshallah. So I'll send you a link to that. But one thing that I would sort of suggest is specifically in the morning and the evening. In the morning, it's quite hard because we're just generally out of energy. But in the evening time, between Maghrib and Isha, or sort of after Isha, is to genuinely just sit down and ask yourself 3 simple questions. Number 1, what did I do for God today? Okay. Number 2, what did I do for the Prophet, peace be upon him? And number 3 is, what did I do for my faith? Okay, just simply asking those 3 questions at the end of each day, Maghrib or Isha time, it sort of instills this idea of muraqabah, this idea of sort of vigilance and watchfulness, this idea of reflecting on your day, and this idea of sort of almost being accountable to yourself, being accountable for your daily actions. Umar radiallahu anh said, take account of yourself before you're taking account of. And he also said that before you go to bed at night, seek forgiveness from everyone else around you before you go to bed. So there's this idea that within Islam that before we go to bed, and it's funny because it's nighttime now, before we go to bed is to be accountable for our actions, take stock of what we've done. What have we done for God? What have we done for the Prophet, peace be upon him? And what have we done for our faith? If there's anything that we've done wrong, seek forgiveness, not from God for yourself, but seek forgiveness from those other people as well, so that when you go to bed, you die in a state of purity, right? Because as we go to bed at night, it is a form of death, right? Sleep is a form of death. And so as we go to bed at night, the one key question that I always go to bed with is, do I want to die in this state, right? Do I want to die in the state that I'm in? And if I don't, I honestly just stay up for the whole of the night until I rectify everything that I've done wrong, or rectify the things that I may have missed out on. And then that's when I'm able to sleep peacefully. So that's just a small tidbit of information. So the IG Live is going to finish because it's been close to an hour. So Jazakallah khair to you all. The intermediate iSyllabus course is also online now as well. That's intermediate year 1 as well as year 2. So Brother Anas just asked that question. So you'll be able to just go to @iSyllabus follow the link, go to their website and sign up to their course. So Jazakallah khair to you all for joining. If you have any questions, DM us on @towardsfaith, and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.